Okay, so the chart that we'll be using, here it is again on the screen for you to see at home. That is available at pbchurch.com/cell, and you'll be able to view that at home as you'd like to also. Okay, so tonight we're starting with the flight into Egypt and the return to Galilee. Now, if you look in your books, you'll notice that Matthew has quite a bit of information, and Luke, he only just barely refers to it. Luke has essentially two verses. Luke 2:39-40 says, "And when they had performed all things according to the law of the Lord, they returned into Galilee to their own city Nazareth, and the child grew and waxed strong in spirit, filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him." But of course, Matthew chapter 2, you get verses 13-23, and there's quite a bit of information in there regarding that flight into Egypt. So most everything is going to be based on the verses that are from Matthew. So we're at question number 64 this evening. And it's based on Matthew chapter 2, verse number 13. Now, by the way, there were a number of things about the questions that we're looking at tonight that I thought to myself, no, I'll just cover them myself, because one section requires too much study, and all the other questions were pretty basic. So I'll just be doing the questions tonight. Question number 64 is based on Matthew 2:13. It says, "And when they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeareth to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise and take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him." And so the question is, where was the last place that Herod might have looked for Jesus to destroy him? So the answer everybody got was C, Egypt. Yes. Okay. Now, Herod had jurisdiction over Bethlehem and Nazareth, so he could have possibly gone to try to do something there. But when Jesus was taken to Egypt, he was clearly out of the reach of Herod. And question number 65 is based on Matthew 2:15. It says, "And was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, Out of Egypt have I called my son." So where did Israel go is the question, to be strengthened before being able to take over the promised land. So we're backing up all the way to the time that Israel had been going to into the well, I'm going to tell you the answer. It's Egypt, into Egypt. Okay, before going to the promised land. So if somebody didn't look at it carefully, maybe they were thinking we're still talking about Jesus. No, but it's about Israel. And so there's a comparison that's being made here. Now, you'll notice the false answers of Babylon and Assyria are there. Now, if that looks like something you've never seen before, or couldn't even imagine you've ever heard of before, then you have not been reading the chart that we have in the auditorium on the wall, a big 4-foot by 16-foot chart that has the timeline for the history of Israel. Most people do sort of get lost somewhere around the time of the captivities at the end of the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah. But Israel was taken captive by Assyria, and then the tribe of Judah, the kingdom of Judah in the south, was taken captive by the empire of Babylon, the Babylonian empire, later on. And so we throw those in there just to be able to say that these are things that people get mixed up sometimes. But you should have some awareness of them. It's a reminder to you that they exist. But this is where Israel was taken into Egypt when Joseph was down there with Pharaoh, and he had given the interpretation of the dream of 7 fat years and 7 lean years, and then his brothers and his father end up coming down because of the famine in the land, and they started a long period of history where they were there until they were able to take over the promised land, until they came back for it. Well, when Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were dwelling in the land of Canaan, you should remember that they were continually at odds with the inhabitants of the land during Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob's day. They would go out, they'd dig wells, and other peoples would come and claim them and push them away and move them on. And they were always having different issues that they had to deal with. When they did descend into Egypt, Joseph had negotiated with Pharaoh to have them located in the land of Goshen. Remember that they were sheep herders, and the Egyptians, they despised cattle herders, and so they did not like shepherds. And so when the brothers came before Pharaoh, Joseph told them, just let them know that you're shepherds and everything. And so Pharaoh was real happy to say, well, fine, we'll put you up in those rich lands, grazing lands up in the north there in the land of Goshen. And so they were able to develop and have some degree of separation from the rest of the culture of Egypt. And so they began to grow and they gained strength. There were 70 people that went down into Egypt, and they came out approximately about 1 million people coming out of Egypt to go into the land. Now, it was during that time that the iniquity of the Amorites, all the time that Israel was down in Egypt, the Amorites, who were the dwellers in the land of Canaan, in the promised land, they were getting more and more wicked to the degree that God would be justified in punishing them. And in fact, in Genesis chapter 15, verses number 13 to 16, we read the original prophecy that God gave to Abraham. He said unto Abraham, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, that would be Egypt, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge. And afterward shall they come out with great substance. And thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace. Thou shalt be buried in a good old age. But in the 4th generation they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. So they had a double purpose. Israel was going to be getting stronger while they were down in Egypt. They'd be growing to be a bigger nation, ready to come into the land. The Amorites were getting to be more and more wicked, so that there would be a justification for casting them out. But even when the Israelites did enter the promised land under Joshua later on, they did not conquer it all completely, not right away. In fact, God left some of the inhabitants, because if they had been removed completely, the land would become too wild. So even though Joshua came in, it was not like a blitzkrieg where they just wiped everything out. They conquered it bit by bit. In Exodus chapter 23 and verse number 29, God said, I will not drive them out from before thee in 1 year, lest the land become desolate, and the beasts of the field multiply against thee. So even though Israel was much stronger when they arrived at the promised land, even then they were not able to completely take it over. Now Matthew 2:15, where it says, out of Egypt have I called my son, according to the prophet, this is a reference to Hosea chapter number 11 and verse number 1. Now Hosea 11:1 is actually most directly applied to Israel's historical deliverance out of Egypt under Moses. Okay, it's not a reference to Jesus Christ being called out of Egypt, but what we have here is the effect of a double prophecy, and this happens regularly, where there's an immediate application, and then there is a further application to the future, and this happens a lot in the scriptures. So Hosea 11:1 says, when Israel was a child, then I loved him and called my son out of Egypt. So going down to Egypt for protection foreshadowed Jesus being taken down to Egypt to escape the wrath of Herod. Okay. I had another note on that, but I will have to find that later on. Okay. Okay, question number 66 is, how long was it since the wise men had come before Herod moved to destroy Christ? Matthew 2:16 says, Then Herod, when he saw that he was mocked of the wise men, was exceeding wroth, and sent forth, and slew all the children that were in Bethlehem, and in all the coast thereof, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men. So the answer is 2 years. 2 years. And at first, somebody might not notice that quite right away, but it took a full 2 years. I mean, he sent them out. Certainly, maybe after a week or two, he would have expected to get some kind of word, or maybe after a month. I mean, it didn't take that long to travel from Jerusalem down to Bethlehem. It shouldn't have taken forever. But it was up to 2 years, according to that time, that he had diligently inquired of the wise men before he finally took action. Okay, Herod did not wait until Jesus would be a threat when he began his ministry at the age of 30. Of course, Herod didn't last that long anyhow, okay? I mean, you could understand if Jesus was traveling around and gaining popularity that might have caused, but Herod was very crazed. Neither did he wait even until the time he was in the temple at the age of 12, demonstrating any kind of wisdom. He didn't wait for the first sign of somebody as a budding king coming along. Herod moved according to the time that he had diligently inquired of the wise men. As Herod was becoming more obsessive and deranged, he moved from killing his own family to killing off any possible competition, even to the slaughtering of the innocents. According to one author, Herod died of a loathsome disease a short time after the perpetration of this terrible crime. He had sought relief for a little while in the mineral baths of one city, and there he attempted suicide, which was prevented. At the same time, he ordered thousands of the most prominent Jews to be shut up in the circus of Jericho, to be executed at the hour of his death. Now, you got to wonder, what did he do that for? Well, oddly, he wanted there to be no lack of lamentation in the land when he died, even if it wasn't for him. He just wanted to have people crying, period. But Salome, to whom he entrusted the bloody order, when his death was announced, set the prisoners free. So he was somebody who was going to make absolutely sure that whatever competition there was, he was going to eliminate it. And just the evidence of his insanity just kept growing. Okay, question 67 is based on Matthew 2:16. It says, Then Herod, when he saw that he was mocked of the wise men, was exceeding wroth, and sent forth and slew all the children that were in Bethlehem. And of course, that's the verse that we just read there. So he thought he was mocked of the wise men. So the question is, what is revealed by the slaying of the children in Bethlehem? Okay, and it is B, how wicked man can be. Okay, definitely man is not tolerant. When we look at people out in the world, all those who fuss at you because you're intolerant, they can be the most intolerant themselves. The people that talk the most about how everything should be very loving and love should matter and love wins can be the most hateful people. It is not of course, how Jesus almost didn't get to die for our sins. There was no way that was going to happen. Jesus was protected from any chance of being killed before the cross. You know, it came a time later on when he was driven to the edge of the cliff to be cast down. There were a number of times when there were some possible threats of death that were thwarted. But in this particular case, in Luke chapter 4 and verses 28 to 30, I think it's extra remarkable. Luke chapter 4, verses 28 to 30 says, And all they in the synagogue, when they heard these things, were filled with wrath, and rose up, and thrust him out of the city, and led him unto the brow of the hill, whereon their city was built, that they might cast him down headlong. But look especially at that verse 30. It says, But he, passing through the midst of them, went his way. Okay, this was not the only time he was escaping death, but it's most striking, and that all he had to do was merely turn and pass through the midst of them. If you can imagine, you've got a mob, and they are driving you along. They're not likely to just stop dead in their tracks. I mean, the momentum of the moment should just normally have carried them out. There they had him at the edge of the cliff, and they were about to throw him over. And here, it's like Well, he didn't have to, some other way to escape, so he just exercised the divine power, turned around. I can imagine them looking at him, and he just passed through the midst of them and walked away from it all. I think there's got to be something that when you're really faced with God, there's going to be a reaction in your heart. And of course, we know sometimes it might make somebody even more crazy. But the point here is that Jesus was not going to be killed before it was time for him to go to the cross. Okay, Matthew 2:17-18 says, then was fulfilled that which was spoken by Jeremy the prophet, saying, in Ramah was there a voice heard, lamentation and weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, and would not be comforted because they are not. And this is referring to the scripture in Jeremiah 31:15. It says, thus saith the Lord, a voice was heard in Ramah, lamentation and bitter weeping, Rachel weeping for her children, refused to be comforted for her children because they were not. Well, the passage in Jeremiah refers to the desolations brought on by Nebuchadnezzar. And this is another one of the times that God reveals to us the double application of prophecy. Pentecost, one of the authors like to use for study, said what Herod did on this occasion was included in the prophecy of Jeremiah. Okay, it was applying, first of all, to Nebuchadnezzar, but the further application was included concerning the children of Rachel there. He says, and thus Matthew called it to our attention. Matthew was noting that every incident that took place in the life of Christ was in keeping with the Old Testament prophetic scriptures. This was true whether the incident fulfilled a direct prophecy, such as concerning the place of his birth, whether it fulfilled a prophetic type, or whether it fulfilled a prophecy according to the principle of double reference. All took place in accordance with the revealed program of God. Okay. Question number 68. Who became ruler after the death of Herod the Great? And here's where you want to take your chart out and get ready to finally get some things hopefully straight that you always wondered about. I have to get one chart out. Ah, there we go. Okay. So Matthew 22:22 says, but when he heard that Archelaus did reign in Judea in the room of his father Herod, he was afraid to go thither, notwithstanding being warned of God in a dream, he turned aside into the parts of Galilee. And so Joseph, coming back with the family, he moved back into Galilee rather than back into Bethlehem because of which one? Archelaus, his son, who became ruler after the death of Herod the Great. Okay, so the other answers here I've included because it gives me an opportunity to explain some confusion you might have when you're going to read later on in the Gospels and also in the book of Acts. So you have three figures that are here. There's Herod Antipas. Herod Antipas is the one who killed John the Baptist and judged Christ. Okay. Then there was Herod Agrippa. Now, Herod Agrippa was the grandson of Herod the Great, who killed James and was eaten of worms. Then there was Herod Agrippa II. He was the son of Herod Agrippa I there. He was the king of Judea, whom Paul almost persuaded to become a Christian. And so you'll have these figures. So you'll see this in the chart as well. You'll notice that you have the gray boxes, and those are the ones that are mentioned in the scripture along with what they were noted for. And so at the top of the chart, you have Herod the Great. He slaughtered the innocents. You've got Herod Philip I on the far right-hand side. And so that Herod, and he's referred to as Philip, he was the first husband of Herodias. Well, she went off with Herod Antipas, okay? He's the gray box to the left on that second row. He was the second husband of Herodias, and he killed John the Baptist, and he was the Herod who Pontius Pilate called in to examine Christ. You see, you'll see him listed as Herod later on, but he's Herod Antipas. That's his full name, is Herod Antipas. Archelaus is the gray box in the middle of the three, and he's the one who was a bigger threat to Joseph and his family. Okay, next line down, you'll see a reference to Herodias. She's the one who married Philip and Antipas. Her brother was Herod Agrippa I. By the way, Aristobulus was killed by his father. He's the father of Herodias and Herod Agrippa I. So Herod Agrippa I, you'll see him referred to as Herod also. And you'll say, wait, I thought all these other Herods were dead or something. Well, no, Herod Agrippa I, he is the one in the book of Acts who killed James and was eaten of worms. Now, Herod Agrippa I, okay, he died eaten of worms, but he had his son Herod Agrippa II. And you'll see him referred to Herod, okay, later on. And you'll wonder, well, who was that again? And so that Herod is the one who consulted Felix in the judgment of Paul. So you're reading the scriptures, you see Agrippa or you see Herod or something like that, and you're wondering, okay, well, I thought some of these guys died or they were in a different place. What happened here? Well, now you'll have the chart there to look at. Now, after the death of Herod the Great, his kingdom was divided into fourths, forming a tetrarchy. That's why you'll have Herod Antipas. That's why you'll have Herod Philip mentioned. All these people had different parts of the kingdom. Herod the Great's kingdom was divided into 4 parts. Herod's sister, her name is Salome. She does not appear on the chart. That's because that's his sister. And she got a portion of the kingdom in the old Philistine areas. Herod Antipas, he got the Galilee region. That's why Pontius Pilate, when he heard that Jesus was from Galilee, he said, oh, okay, well, Herod Antipas is coming down here to check things out. Well, I'm going to send him over there for that Herod to examine him. And that Herod, he was interested. He wanted to see Jesus and maybe see if he would do a miracle or something. So then Philip, he got the area that's the modern day area of the Golan Heights. That's the northeast of the Sea of Galilee. And Archelaus is the one who got the lower regions, Samaria, Judea, and Idumea also. The kingdom was split up into 4, and then things get worse from there. They have more splits and things that happen from there. Okay, so who became the ruler after the death of Herod the Great? Well, Archelaus, his son, but he was only the ruler in the southern portion. Now, you should know that Archelaus, he was not too popular. Okay, he had issues. Shortly after he was named the king, I'm sorry, Archelaus is the. Oh, I'm sorry. By the way, yes, I did have to correct that in the books. In the books, the former editions, it says grandson. It's son. Okay, it is his son. Okay. You should know that Archelaus didn't last long. He was replaced by a governorship in 6 AD. So even in the southern kingdom there, you had the one Herod who's up in the north, but Herod Archelaus, he was deposed and the Roman Senate put in place a governorship. So by the time of Christ, you have Pontius Pilate. Okay. Very good. Question 69. Why did Joseph take Mary and Jesus to Nazareth? And the answer is, because God told him to go there. Okay. He did fear Archelaus, okay, but the reason that he went is because God told him to. It's not that God made him go there, but God just simply gave the command. Matthew 2:22 says, but when he heard that Archelaus did reign in Judea in the room of his father, he was afraid to go thither, notwithstanding, being warned of God in a dream, he turned aside into the parts of Galilee. Now, Matthew does not quote a prophecy directly here. It's likely that Matthew is associating the word Nazarene with the Hebrew word netzer, which means branch or sprout. The branch was a common term for the Messiah. Okay, so he was sending into Nazareth, and he was going to be called a Nazarene because of that. Isaiah 11:1 says, "And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots." Since Hebrew was written with only consonants and Netzer would have appeared as NZR, the same main consonants of Nazareth, in Aramaic, the common language of Jesus' day, the word for Nazareth and the Hebrew word for branch sounded very much alike. So Jesus was the branch predicted by the prophets, and the name of the town he grew up in happens to sound just like the prophet's word for branch. And so when he's told to go to Nazareth, he's fulfilling prophecy by being called the branch. Okay, before we move to the next section, and we can do the next section, I think, any questions or comments that somebody might have? If you have a comment, raise your hand so Joe can get to you. I'm going to unmute everybody at home. Is there any question that anybody would have? Okay, Joe, if you take the microphone to Wilma.
It's a comment about question 66. The wise men could have seen the star 2 years before they actually got to Israel. I don't know how long it would take them to travel.
Well, no, they met with Herod in Jerusalem.
Yes.
Okay, and so from Jerusalem to Bethlehem is like just a few days journey.
Yeah.
So they would have gotten there very quickly and seen the star there, and then arrived. And so it was like 2 years from it wouldn't take 2 years from the travel, just a few days distance, in other words.
No, I meant the star that led them to Jerusalem.
But they found it over the
They saw the star and then they started traveling. From the time they first saw the star until Herod started looking, it could have been 2 years.
But it's only talking about how the time was according to the inquiry that Herod had made. So when he asked them, and according to the time that he asked them, then it was 2 years later.
I misread it then. I thought
Okay.
that it was the
It would be interesting though. Yeah. No, that's where that part of the phrase sometimes people get missed in there. Anybody from home? Okay, I'm muting the callers again. So we have the microphone for Tone.
In other words, Pastor, the timeline is that the time that the wise men arrived to see King Herod, Jesus was already about 2 years old, and so and the travel time to Bethlehem is about 2 to 3 days. So it's only a couple of days before Herod got suspicious that the wise men were bypassing him already. So he took action.
Well,
because his estimate of age of Jesus is 2 years and under.
yes,
So
it's 2 years and under.
therefore, because the turnaround time for the wise men would be about a week.
Well, the turnaround time is specifically stated in Matthew 2:16. Let me read it again. He says that he went and slew all the children of Bethlehem from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men. So starting with their inquiry about him, starting with that, according to that time period, 2 years from the time that they inquired, is when Herod would have him killed.
Because when the wise men saw Jesus, he was already at the house and he was about 2 years old.
Okay, but it's linked to the inquiry time. The 2 years referred to is linked not to his birth, but to the inquiry.
Ah,
When
okay.
the inquiry
Okay,
is made.
okay, okay.
So he links it to that. Okay. Okay, and we'll revisit that on the side of somebody who didn't quite get that. Okay. Section 14, the childhood of Christ. Hang on, let me see here. No, you know what? We're going to do it again. I think it's going to be just a few too many questions to fill in tonight and be able to get the prayers in. So we will hold off. If you did your questions up through section 14 at least, then you are ahead for Sunday. Okay, very good.